Hey, what's up? Question of the day, or a question that I think about often, is how much are you producing for yourself? So a lot of people work and they trade their time for money. In a way, it's like working to bring resources from somewhere else, money, back to yourself. And you can look into other things and consider certain actions productive, like exercising is probably productive, eating healthy is probably productive. But we'll focus in terms of raw increase in resource. And so most people have a job, most adults have a job and they'll get resources that way. But outside of that, I don't think there's that many things many people do. And I come back to this thought a lot whenever I feel like I have a little bit of spare time on my hands. How can I be more productive? What can I do to set myself up better? I don't feel like I'm doing enough. I feel like I could be doing more. How do I make the most of my time? And for better or worse, the way my mind works, my experiences, it'll often start with a few tiers of possible actions I can take. One might be gambling. Maybe if I'm really good at gambling, maybe I see certain patterns that most people can't see. Maybe I can be a professional gambler, maybe a professional poker player, maybe I can win money that way. From many years of experience, many trials, maybe not a big enough sample or frequent enough, but from my current experience, I don't feel like that's the way out for me. Another thought that I often have is whether or not I should take up a weekend job or do some kind of part-time job on top of my full-time work, because I still feel youthful, I still feel like I could do it, I've got the energy, why not? But it is very different. You have to work different hours. A lot of people, even with part-time work, they kind of want you to be available at different times that might overlap with your full-time job, which makes it tougher. And so just having work available in the weekends, basically only when you want to work those weekends, because sometimes you might have things on in the weekend, or maybe you need rest. So my ideal scenario would be able to tap in and out of that cash flow as needed. But again, that's not very convenient for a company or someone looking for a part-time worker. And so the other place my mind goes is tutoring, which in a way is similar to part-time work. I think it could be something, but it feels very low level to me. And while it could be good for pocket money here and there, I'd like to try and really do something big. I think everyone should try to do something big when they're young, when they still have or feel like they still have some youth within them, and shoot for the moon. And so I don't feel like trading time for money per se, or like one-to-one, like it doesn't feel very scalable is what I'm trying to say. And so I want to look at other solutions. And then so the last place my mind really goes is content creation. And I think content creation it's not like I'm making money from creating videos or anything, but I think the potential is there. And there's so many different factors about it that I can see the value in it. Even if it didn't make money, it feels like I'm doing something productive. So I'm documenting my life in certain ways. I get to voice my opinions. I get to have a recollection of what I looked like when I was younger, potentially for when I'm older. And obviously, if it does well, then there's potential for other avenues or other doors to open up, which is an interesting thing. And it seems like it's been around long enough where it's got a proven track record where if you do well, if you kind of pop off, then there is income potential. What's interesting about content creation or making videos is there's different formats and different types of videos. And I'm sure there are people who do well in every category, every different type of video format. But I also think some people do exceptionally well in a certain format over others. So for example, you might have people who are live streamers, people who live stream for a very long time, people who are gamers, people who vlog, people who teach something, people who create entertaining videos, comedy, people who go on adventures and showcase new places and new foods that people otherwise might not be able to experience. There are short form videos, YouTube Shorts, TikTok, long form videos, podcasts. There's so many different types of paths you can go down within content creation. And yeah, I think it's just about figuring out what works for you, what works for your audience. And until you really figure it out, I think you just have to trial and error. And so in my past, this is going into a weird direction, kind of detouring away from productivity, but you know, I've tried lots of different things. I've tried mukbangs, I've tried making music, I don't know if I've tried comedy actually, but I've always been curious about that one. I've tried doing a vlog. I've tried like Q&A style, where it's just like I'm answering a question or just talking about a thought that's on my mind. And it also depends on your lifestyle, I guess, like what's going to be most convenient for you, how much planning is required, how much time is it going to take away from you. But I do believe there is a style that suits everyone the best. And a perfect example is someone who might not be great at talking when they're in a group of people in reality, but they're great or they're fantastic at talking to a camera, and it captures well and it presents well, and they might do really well online, and maybe that helps them get better at talking in real life or whatever, but that might just be their best outlet. And then you might have someone who's terrible on camera. Maybe they're very conscious of the camera, where it is, the lens and everything. But in real life, when they're talking to you or when they're talking in a group, they're very charming and charismatic and thoughtful in the way that they speak. Anyways, all of this to say that I know there are lots of people, including myself, who wants to be richer than they are, ideally yesterday. But if you look at the actions they take and the productivity they work on or generate, it's strictly focused on work. And it's the same for me, and this is why I'm talking about it, is of course during business hours, work hours, I'll be working, but I'll often work more than those hours as well. And I do that for a number of reasons. One is perhaps I feel a little bit behind in work and I feel like I just need to put in some extra hours to catch up. Perhaps I know that there's a potential lull. Maybe I'm about to go on annual leave or go on vacation, and so I want to do a little bit more extra work to create a bit more buffer. Perhaps I want to do a little bit more work in advance or in the weekend, so that during the week I can kind of take the foot off the pedal a little bit, or have a little bit more breathing room, I suppose. And a lot of that stuff I do unpaid, or I don't ask for pay because it's not enforced that you have to be doing that. And technically I don't have to be doing that, but there's a certain responsibility I might have as a lead for a project, or just a project in general if I wasn't the lead on it. Certain accountability I want to have for the work that I do, and a certain standard that I want the work to be at. Part of it is probably also the fact that there's parts of my job that I like doing, and potentially, this is kind of a bad cycle, but it's like if I'm stuck in a problem, I'll be stressed out about the problem. If I manage to solve it, then I decrease the stress. But when you solve the problem, you just get another problem. And so it's kind of this like cycle of stress and less stress, stress and less stress, but it's what I've kind of become accustomed to in some ways based on what I do. And another reason is probably that it just keeps my tool sharp. So let's say I got axed in 2 weeks and I needed to find a new job, then I would know that my skills are sharp and I'd be prepared or confident in my abilities to find new work. I'm sure there's various other reasons that I might not be able to think of right now, but I think that's a good set. And tying this back to productivity, all of those hours, even outside of business hours, it's productivity towards work though. So it's not necessarily work that you own. And so the question does become, how much productivity are you doing for yourself? And that's a really great question, in my opinion. And it really starts to make you think. And perhaps it may explain why you haven't been as fruitful up to where you've gotten, if you look at it that way. And maybe it's an eye-opener on things that you could do to try and be more productive for yourself, so that you can build and gather resources for yourself. I'd love to know if there are other things that I could do to generate more income or more resources or gather more resources for myself. But that's kind of where I've been stuck at for the longest time, which is such a shame, because I feel like a lot of people probably feel like this, is that I feel like there's so much productivity that I could generate, but to put that productivity to use in the most fruitful way that works the best for me, that's the toughest thing. And once I crack that code, once anyone cracks that code, I think it's off to the races, but that's the tricky part. Anyways, thanks for watching. See you next time.